Thank you, Senator Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Crapo and Ranking Member Wyden, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Before I get into my questions, I do want to take a moment to address the federal government shutdown. While the topic of today's hearing is certainly important and I have questions for you, Congress should be focused right now on working together to find a bipartisan path to reopen the federal government, restore critical services for people, prevent health insurance premiums from doubling, and keep millions of people from losing their coverage and the care that goes with it. And so while I look forward to hearing more from our witnesses, I once again urge my colleagues to come together on a bipartisan basis for the American people. Now to my questions. Ms. Nellen, I voted for the Genius Act earlier this year in order to provide clear rules for the stablecoin industry that promote innovation and address national security issues. Looking ahead to other cryptocurrency issues, we need to continue to balance supporting the innovative U.S. industry with while putting in place strong national security protections. For example, cryptocurrency raises important questions for our tax system. Cryptocurrency activities don't always fit neatly into existing law. This creates real uncertainty for taxpayers who are trying to follow the rules and for the IRS as it works to investigate criminal activity. So, Ms. Nellen, given the technical complexity of cryptocurrency and other digital assets, how can Congress and the IRS establish tax rules that both provide clarity to the U.S. industry and bolster the ability of law enforcement to go after criminals who use cryptocurrency for illicit activities?
Thank you for the question, Senator. There's two parts to that. So far as the compliance aspect, the IRS has provided a lot of guidance back in 2014 just by saying under the tax lot's property, because then we have a whole set of rules on property.
Right.
Though there are some unique things that happen with digital assets, a hard fork, an airdrop, staking, mining, that aren't really neatly fitting into existing guides there. I think the recent guidance that came along with the broker reporting, where they clarified how we treat amount realized, how we treat basis, that's added clarity and everybody can follow that and be consistent. So I think so far as calculating gains and losses on most transactions, the rules are fairly clear. When we get into other issues where you're trying to figure out, for example, a mark-to-market rule where it applies to securities and commodities, there's some people think, oh, all these things are securities, they fall under there. Well, that's not true, and it makes quite a burden to figure out if they do fall under there. You also run into inconsistency on that. Another one, I think, where it would be very helpful, there are people that donate and companies donating the very valuable Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin's gone up tremendously in value, and people think, I'll donate it, but they need to get a qualified appraisal if it's worth more than $5,000, and that's puzzling, and some people overlook that. And then, which means that they didn't actually get the donation deduction because they didn't follow the rules, which is really unfortunate.
Right.
To change the rule, make it very clear from Congress doing that, that just like publicly traded securities are a readily valued asset, I think if we could put in crypto that is listed on an exchange, that would really aid in the donation of those items without getting a qualified appraisal or even knowing if it truly is a qualified appraisal. There's a lot of rules on what makes something a qualified appraisal.
That is very helpful, and that actually gets to my second question. And in addition to wanting you to answer that question, Ms. Kramer, I was also going to ask you how the qualified appraiser requirement for cryptocurrency donations hold back the U.S. digital assets industry and nonprofits who accept cryptocurrency. So do you have more to add?
Well, the only thing that I would add to it is just to underline what was said, which is that it's a rule that doesn't need to be in place with respect to publicly traded products, and to treat publicly traded cryptocurrency as if it's a unique piece of artwork is really incorrect and unnecessary at this point.
All right, I appreciate that. Ms. Nellen, one more question about reporting requirements, which are one of the tools we have to track and prevent money laundering, to also make sure that we prevent sanctions evasion and other criminal activity. For decades, we've required businesses to report when they receive more than $10,000 in cash because large, untraceable transactions can raise red flags for criminal activities. As digital assets have become more widely used, they've introduced new challenges for law enforcement and tax administration. And that's why in 2021, I supported including digital asset reporting provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law, requiring businesses that receive more than $10,000 in digital assets to report those transactions to the IRS, just as they would with cash. I know I am slightly over time, but can you briefly help us understand from your perspective, is it important that businesses report large digital asset transactions the same way large cash transactions are reported? And should Congress take steps to clarify that FinCEN should also receive the same information on digital asset transactions?
You're right. And the legislation of November 2021 already added digital assets to the code section that requires, and you're right, it's been around since 1984, that if you had more than $10,000 of cash collected from a merchant and one or more related transactions, had to file the Form 8300, then added that digital assets, so that the law is there. And the form actually is electronically filed that I believe does go to FinCEN. I mean, it's actually on the FinCEN website to file those.
I think there's been some confusion, so I'll stop there and follow up with you. But
And also they're waiting for regulations on that 6050I. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.